Welcome to Solutions OP Clinical Trials Podcast. My name is Olga and I'm the Managing Director of Solutions OP. We are a small team of experienced professionals working on clinical trials in the United Kingdom. I'll use our podcast to discuss hot topics in clinical trials and provide analysis of the latest trends and challenges in pharma and medical device industries, not just in the UK but globally. Thank you for listening. Okay, so welcome to today's episode of the podcast. The topic of this episode is how to improve patients' engagement in clinical trials. This is one of the lasting challenges for everyone working in the pharma and biotech industry. And so far, there is no simple solution to this problem. But my guest today is one of the people working to find solution to low recruitment in clinical trials. And his name is Keith Berelowitz, who has worked for many years in the field of patients' engagement and recruitment. He's also the founder of pRxEngage, which is a platform designed to address the issue of how we can recruit more patients in clinical trials. And he'll tell us a little bit more in a bit. And also, for those of you who've been in the pharma and biotech industry, you probably know Keith because he's the chairman of the Fulham Ethics Committee. So it's really a pleasure to have him today with me. So thank you, Keith, for joining me. And I'll ask you the first question, which is to tell me a little bit more about your company and your work, what you've been doing.
Thank you, Olga. And just a quick side note on the Ethics Committee. Olga just reminded me that she submitted an application a few years ago. So obviously that interaction went well because we're speaking today. So anyway, it's good to speak with you, and thank you for giving us the opportunity or me the opportunity to speak a little bit more about what we do. So pRxEngage is a health tech platform. We are really designed to engage patients, help educate them both about clinical trials in general, about different medications, therapeutics, and so on, inform patients of ongoing clinical studies, and then empower those patients to participate or apply to take part in these trials. We focus very much on it's the patient's journey, and we're just here to help and support and signpost along the way. I mean, I can give you a little bit more if you want, but
yes, I had a look into your website. Actually, it's quite interesting because I saw that you also have that option to provide like a more lay language description of the clinical trials. So how does that work? Do you have someone who actually extract that information from somewhere, or do you use the AI? How do you do that? If you can just give us a little bit more information.
Sure. So we list well over 12,000 studies, and these are commercial clinical trials. We do list some academic trials as well. But we are taking a lot of this information from publicly available sources. So this could be from clinicaltrials.gov or other public registries. That's how we list so many trials. It would be impossible for a human to sit there and create these very simple to follow study summaries. And so we've developed an AI algorithm that will take this information, parse it, but this will then turn this into a short summary of the study with an overview schedule. And we do that for all studies, but then for the companies that we work with, we've got a commercial model where we also we'll take the patient information sheet and also the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and we will use that information to create the summaries and then one of the assessments that we do for the studies. This gives a far more detailed and data-rich summary for patients. But ultimately, our job is to inform patients and also with the realization that not everyone speaks English as their first language. So we do translate on screen into 45 different languages, spoken to a number of wonderful translators. And, we know that the translations are not perfect. They're not as good as a human translator. But the enemy of good is perfect, as one of my colleagues often tells me. And, better to have something that allows more people to get an understanding of what it is we do. And then beyond presenting the information on the studies, we use the inclusion-exclusion criteria to help form one of the assessment tools that helps a patient look at their medical suitability for a study, but in their terms and in their way. So we understand a lot of patients will not be au fait with particular blood results or ECG data and so on. And so the way that we've used AI here is to present questions in such a way that patients will understand. We did all of this development with a large group of patients who helped us refine the way in which these algorithms work and the information that we present. Ultimately, there's a short series of assessments. Medical suitability is important, but a really significant piece of what we do focuses on behavioral insights, looking at how patients would potentially interact with the trial, looking at their decisional conflict, looking at their mental fitness, not capability or capacity, but their mental fitness to actually see a trial through to completion. And then finally, we have an assessment that helps us look at predictability in terms of how likely is it that this patient will see the study through to the end. Ultimately, what we're looking to do is build up awareness and then follow that up with competence and then relatability, and that's what those assessments do. With that final step, supporting patients to connect directly to the research sites where we have a commercial relationship with the biopharma company, and we have all of the site information listed. In fact, I've just been writing a case study of where this can go horribly wrong, and in fact, I'm putting that out tomorrow. If the patient is unable to connect directly to the site, as we had in this case that I'm evidencing, it took more than 11 emails, a couple of weeks to finally connect the patient to a site. And that's why I'm a big advocate, whether it's a platform like ours or other platforms out there, that sponsors engage with companies such as ourselves in order to help facilitate a simple and efficient process that allows patients to seamlessly engage with research. We ran a survey a while ago. More than 80% of patients are interested in participating in trials or taking part in some capacity, yet less than 30% actually went on and did so. Now, we're losing a lot of patients there for absolutely no reason other than we're not doing things quite right, hence why pRxEngage was born.
I understand, but that's very interesting, and I think it's an excellent idea, and sounds like something which is very useful. So, how do patients get in? Could patients just come and register for you? How does that work from a patient point of view, if they want to be part of your platform?
So that's the other thing. There are a number of other platforms like us out there that ask patients to register upfront, and then they'll start to show them data, or they'll show them a bit of data, then ask them to register. We are quite unique, I think, in as much as we don't ask patients to register with us at all. We will ask for some limited contact detail. That will be name, contact, email, and telephone number, but that's only for patients who want to be connected to a site, because we need to provide that information to the site. Being an ethics chair, consent is very important to me, so we have multiple layers of consent and touch points through the platform where we're starting to collect this data. But it's not until that final step that indeed we do so. How patients find us? In a number of different ways. This is through social media, direct searches. I'm quite loud on LinkedIn and various other channels, so through patient advocates. But then we work very closely with a number of community groups, and community groups are really important, because this is where patients go for knowledge and then they're seeking an action. And actually, what is so important to us as a team at pRxEngage is we want patients to be on our platform for as short a time as possible for them to move on to their action. And their action is, I have found a trial that I'm interested in, and I now want to put myself forward to that trial. That's feasible by facilitating this through on-page widgets with these various community groups that seamlessly show the patients the studies in the native community group page, and then bring the patient to our platform to go through the various steps that I described before. And it's working. We've had over 50,000 patients come and use the platform in the last few months. So yeah, we're happy with where we're getting.
That's brilliant, because it's very important for people to be able to find information. I know myself, because I wanted to help my parents' neighbors who had a special, very rare genetic disease, and I was trying to find clinical trial for their son, who was 16 at the time. And I know it took me hours, and I work in the field, and it took me hours to even limit it down to that particular genetic disease so I can find something. So I think what you're doing is really good, and it's really helpful for research and for patients as well in finding information.
Thank you. I mean, in fact, you said it took you hours. What kicked me into gear to finally do this was I was looking for a trial for myself. Now, bear in mind, I've worked in clinical research and patient engagement and operations for 20 plus years. You would think I would know where to go and how to navigate. And I gave up, and I thought, if I've got that background knowledge, either I'm particularly stupid and who knows what I've been doing for this long, or actually the system is just not working as it should do. There are good bits. I think now is the time that we can do this with the advances in technology, and technology's caught up with the human brain in this regard. But what is absolutely critical is that you combine domain expertise from a technological perspective with domain expertise, and I'm not talking I've worked in patient engagement for 6 months, I know everything, but true domain expertise as to how patient journeys evolve, and you bring that together, and that's how we look to start to solve the solution.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your explanation and for the great work you're doing. So my other question was, according to you, what could be the main reasons for clinical trials not recruiting patients? Could this be the design of the protocol, the resources at the hospitals? You already mentioned that patients are interested, so apparently it's not that lack of interest from the patients. Yeah. So what do you think, according to your observations, is the reason for all that we have in clinical research?
I think the first thing to point out, and I say this regularly, is that pretty much everyone involved in clinical research and innovation is doing so for the right reasons. There are very few people that I've come across where I just wonder why they're in this particular environment. You shrug, but I think this is the perception that a number of patients have, is that, pharma's done this wrong, or the research sites have done this, or my community group are not supporting me. And then pharma say, but patients are being difficult. And, there's a lot of finger pointing, and there's a lot of them versus us. And actually, we need to change that dynamic first, i.e. really understand each other, understand everyone's why. And once we understand people's why and we understand their background, which is why I always ask people when I have a call with them, I meet them for the first time, tell me your origin story, because I want to understand their why. Why are they here? I'm yet to find a person that works in a biopharma company that has got into this because they enjoy failure. And ultimately, biopharma is working on a drug you are more likely to fail than not, as shown by the fact that not every molecule makes it to market, and not every therapy is that breakthrough therapy. We have to go through a lot of failure, so you have to be quite a robust person to do this. In terms of what's going wrong, it's not one thing that we could fire a silver bullet at, and that would fix everything. If that was the case, we would have solved it years ago. It's a compounding of challenges. And again, that's why it's so important to have all the stakeholders involved. Patients want to be engaged in research, but they want to be engaged early on. So one of the big things that we require from an ethics perspective is true patient involvement in the design of that research, and then evidencing this in the right way. I recently put out a post trying to work out not a single definition, but what are the principles we should be working towards to show true engagement. True engagement may be an N of 3 or 4 patients, but that's fine for an ultra-rare disease. That's not suitable for a common condition such as hypertension or type 2 diabetes. What kind of involvement has to happen, and when does it happen? It differs for every trial. There's no one size fits all. Otherwise, it becomes a tick box exercise. But we also have to appreciate that we're not making television sets or cars that come off a production line. We are developing drugs, and everyone reacts differently, and things take time, and sometimes they take a bit longer than they should do. But if we start to look at this from that human perspective, but use technology to support us, that's how we start to make it better. So it could be travel distance, or the introduction of decentralization, or expanding on decentralization of trials that starts to move the needle. Or as we do, present information in a plain language way, or connect patients directly to the sites. There's lots of things that we need to think about. In fact, we've just had the results from a survey that we put out earlier, or a few months ago. And there's not one thing that stands out as this is wrong. But what collectively comes across from all the stakeholders is we aren't quite there. We've got somewhere to go. The good news is we've got the technology, and we've also got the willingness. And if you have that, and the right people who want to give and not just talk about these things, we will make advances. But I think we have to understand that some of these advances will be incremental, and we have to therefore set expectation.
That's I completely agree with you. If we have the will, we'll do it at the end. Yeah, I agree with you absolutely on this one. So now you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to see, what else do you think we can do to engage people more, in terms of, you have different communities, you have people who don't necessarily have the basic health knowledge to make these decisions. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have in clinical research. Even if something could help someone, if that person doesn't have the actual knowledge to understand how this could help them, this could put them off, and they might not be willing to participate just because they don't have the knowledge to understand. So how can we address this? What do you think on that?
2 things, 2 words: education and relatability. As far as I'm concerned, if I were to present you and you knew nothing about clinical trials, if I were to say to you, oh, you have this medical condition, why don't you have a look at this clinical trial? Now, if you've never heard of clinical trials, instantly your defenses are down. Even if you have heard of clinical trials, well, why are you giving this to me? Again, the defenses start to come down. It is a human quality, nature, whatever you want to call it, to be cautious, and no is easier than yes. Far easier in most cases, because you can shut it down, you can move on, it hasn't impacted your life. So for me, when I go back to education and relatability, first we need to help educate people about trials. But how do you do that? You need to make it relatable to their day-to-day life. Use analogies. So I'm writing a book with a colleague, and actually we are blending in everyday analogy into that, relating to clinical research, how it's performed, how you can involve yourself and so on, what to expect, but trying to relate this to day-to-day things that are common to us. In fact, when we launched pRxEngage, whilst trial matching platforms or trial finder platforms exist, most of the general population don't see them. So we related this analogy to where your clinical trial matchmaker, similar to a dating app, will present you opportunities of hope. We use the terminology swipe right on research. And so it starts to familiarize clinical trials into populations that may not have necessarily been aware, but do so in a way that we're using language that will be familiar to them. And at that point, we can start that education piece on what clinical trials are and how to get involved and what to expect and the types of therapies. And then going back to the relatability, how does this trial relate to you, your life, and impact on you and your future and those around you?
That's perfect. And actually, I have an example for this one, because I used to work on a clinical trial where one of our hospitals, they had a lot of African Caribbean participants. And I found that very strange. So I asked the nurse, how did you do that? I mean, how did you convince so many people to participate? And they said that they had a patient who was very happy with the study. She was African Caribbean. And apparently she spoke to other people, because it was like a chronic condition where people know each other, they meet every time in the hospital and so on. So she had such positive experience that she actually convinced other people to come forward and try and participate in this clinical trial. So I thought that was quite amazing. I haven't seen it ever since this clinical trial, but I think maybe that's another way of doing it. Maybe if we involve patients who've participated in clinical trials a bit more in educating other patients, because I think maybe it makes a difference if you hear it from someone else who has your condition and has lived in experience, rather than us trying to explain it from a scientific point of view.
Of course, I think who do patients trust the most? It is their friends, family, and so on, as well as their clinician. So they may ask their doctor, but you will want assurances from your friends, your family, that they're comfortable with this. And that example that you gave, that's something that we've always employed as not a tactic, but a necessity. If you can help one patient speak to another so that patient can explain, this was my journey, this is what you're likely to see, good, bad, ugly, whatever it happens to be. Because I would rather a patient makes a decision, this is not for me, before they're enrolled in the study, rather than drop out after enrollment. Because that just confounds the data, makes it challenging for that patient, makes it challenging for the pharma company, the research site, and so on. So it's another initiative we're working on at the moment. We're doing quite a few things, but again, that patient voice and making that available in a way that it's not obtrusive, but allows patients to meet with other patients, either remotely or watch videos of patients' experience, to understand that they're not walking this path alone. And in fact, we've got a meeting coming up in London. We're speaking at Patient Centricity in February. And really the theme is we all walk different paths, but we walk together. Meaning that we have different conditions, we have different challenges in life, but actually our stories are quite similar. And if we learn from each other, we can foster a greater strength to help us get through. So, yeah, the patient voice is very important.
Thank you so much, Keith. Yes, I absolutely agree with this one. And my very last question that I'm going to ask you is, because I'm always interested, what could regulators do to help us? So my question is, what could the regulatory agencies do to help us with recruitment? Because we kind of see it always like a pharma company's problem. But I think we need to look more from different angles. So what do you think the regulators could do from their point to kind of help recruitment in clinical research? If you've thought about that.
One of which I think is better communication. So, I mean, a perfect case in point, I was chairing a committee meeting, ethics committee meeting on Monday. and one of the applicants had put forward their PPI. So this is their patient and public involvement in research. And to be quite honest, it didn't really meet muster. It wasn't sufficient. And I asked the question, did you know, and I asked of the HRA members that support us, and they do an amazing job. But where do biotech and pharma companies and companies such as yourself and others find this information? And it's kind of buried on websites, and it needs to be more pronounced. So better communication of this is what we expect to see. But beyond that, listening. Absolutely critical is that if you're going to present this patient information, then regulators need to listen. If patients en masse are saying, we support research, but the research needs to change in whatever capacity, one of the big hoo-has that's going on now is the need for placebo in really late phase trials, and the necessity of this. Yes, from a scientific perspective, I understand it, but from a patient's perspective, would a patient with a terminal condition or a disease that is going to progress over time and only get worse, asking them to be on a placebo for 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Well, I mean, ask yourself the question, would I allow one of my family members to do that? And the likely true answer is no. So listening to patients and listening to support groups. But to do that, you need to do good PPI. You need to present the data in a way that is not accusatory or demanding, but rather this is the data, and then provide potential solutions. Don't expect someone else to come up with all the solutions, but listening and better outward communication is what I'd say the regulatory agencies need to do.
That's perfect, and actually I completely agree with you, because I have seen quite a few, particularly in Alzheimer clinical trials, where they're using placebo for patients with mild or moderate Alzheimer's. I've seen in oncology studies as well, where there's demand from the regulatory agencies to have placebo. So I completely agree. I wish we can have a better option to work on scientific part of it and not use placebo. I agree.
Don't get me wrong. There are studies. I'm a scientist by training. Using a placebo is the right thing for a true scientific study, but at the right time for the right studies, during the right phase. Then there are times where it doesn't make sense. Now, interestingly, there are options that the regulators are considering that do away with the need for placebo for certain studies or at particular times. And when speaking to the regulators about this, they explain it to you, but they explain it to you one-on-one. And that's the communication piece. So many people aren't aware this is what we would potentially accept. I think the UK is brilliant with its scientific advice, albeit it takes a while to get these meetings, where you can engage with the agency and put forward your ideas. I know other countries do this as well. And I think greater communication and a willingness of the regulators to really listen and think about the solutions that are presented to them and then act to them.
Thank you so much, Keith. That's perfect. And what I'm going to say just in conclusion, whoever is interested from patients or companies or universities and would like to check on your platform, they can go and look into the pRxEngage and see your work, what you're doing. And thank you so much for that very interesting discussion today. Thank you.
Pleasure.